Okay, so now we're gonna move into different layers of the epidermis. So if you look at this, it has more epidermis, which is right here. So right here, and this is epidermis, and then underneath you have dermis here. So this would be the dermis. So you got multiple layers of epidermis. So you have stratum corneum. The word strata means layer. So stratum corneum is one layer. Stratum lucidum, next one. Stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, and then stratum basale to the basement. So it's a lot to remember. These layers are kind of subcategories of epidermis, and you do need to memorize them. So this is one of those things that all anatomy students have to memorize. You have to memorize the names of all the layers in the epidermis. So now the topmost layer is called stratum corneum. Okay, because the word corny is part of so corny, the reason the way this layer is named is, for the word corny or horny, is because of the keratin. So why it might be called the horny layer is because it's the same stuff that makes the horns in animals. So if you look at cow or deer or something like that, they got keratin, and that's the same chemical that's making stratum corneum. So you can clearly see stratum corneum here in both of these. This is microscopic version, this is a cartoon version. So then if you work with your hands and you get calluses, and you can clearly see that there are these little flakes coming off, and that's going to be the keratin. So that's why this layer is best for protecting you, because they're already dead skin cells, and this can take a lot of abuse and abrasion. So that's why this is called corny or horny layer, due to the fact that it has keratin in it. After that, you have another layer called strata or stratum lucidum. Again, strata stands for layer. And this is one thing that I forgot to define was, no, I did actually, I told you strata stands for stratum, and stratum means layers. So there are lots of different terms we use to describe layers. We can call them tunics, or we can call it strata. So when you look into these layers of atmosphere, which strata are you looking at? If you're digging fossils, which strata did you find the fossil in? So it just means layer. So this layer is called stratum lucidum. Lucidum means light. So you see that this layer is light compared to this. So this is light layer, lucidum. So kind of light here too. And the next layer we have is stratum granulosum. This is called granulosum because this is grainy layer. Everything that I'm talking about here refers to what it looks like under the microscopes. You probably don't know this, but most of the things that we look at under the microscope have been stained, and you put a stain on it in order for things to show up, and then you can see clearly under the microscope. So this layer, it has it kind of looks grainy. Granulosum refers to grainy. What that means is that the dye, when it dries up, it looks like little dots on there. It looks kind of grainy, and it creates the really dark purple layer that you find in the epidermis. And then after that, you have stratum spinosum. So that's stratum granulosum, and then you have spinosum. So it's called spinosum because of what it looks like under the microscope. When you first start out with the cells, they look all nice and round. And as the cells start to move up, then they get starved of blood, and there's no food, and they start to shrink, they start to change in shape, and they start to look like kind of flat. So let me see if I can draw this for you. So these cells, they are looking all nice in shape, and they're connected together using these gap junctions. So let's see, use different color. So maybe there's a gap junction here, maybe another one here. So that's how they are held together with gap junction. So that's this layer looks all nice and round like this, and then there's the nucleus. But as it's starting to move up, it's going to be starved of food and nutrients, and then it's gonna start looking flat. So let's see. So I'm gonna try to draw. So the cells are still held together, but because they're deprived of nutrients or food, they kind of start taking this shape where they kind of seem like they're being pulled. So if you look here, that's what it looks like. So they start to shrink, they start to change shape, they move up, eventually they start to change their shape even more and more and more, and then they become flat when they reach the top. So, and this happens with the nucleus being in it, and part of it's going to be connected. So remember, because of the gap junctions is connected, so they're still connected here, but they're still being pulled. They're connected with maybe desmosomes. If you don't remember that, maybe go back to chapter 2 and review that. So desmosomes are tight junctions, and the function of that is basically to connect the cell next to it. So we have lots of cells, and they seem like they're stapled together, so it'd be connected like that, like right here. So when you go from stratum spinosum and then you move up to stratum corneum, the liquid starts to get sucked out. And when you have this attachment point, like this one here, so maybe you have a junction here, and then here, I should have drawn this in red, because these cells there don't seem like they are deprived of water or nutrients, so they look fine. But these one I was trying to draw as they're deprived of water and nutrients, but there's, this should have been red, same as this, but they are connected here with the junctions. So when they're connected still and they get deprived of nutrients, that's what they look like. So it creates almost a spiky or spiny appearance under the microscope. So that's where the term comes from, stratum spinosum. So now, even though we call it that, I've never really seen it. So it's actually very rare for you to see the spiky stratum spinosum the way that you can basically it's found between the basale and granulosum, so that's a stratum spinosum. And because it makes the spiky appearance, that's where the name comes from. So that's stratum spinosum. And then we have very last layer, that's basale. So, let's see. Stratum basale. And this stands for basement. So it's the basement layer that everything is going to be attached to. That's going to be right before dermis. So it comes right before dermis. Then after that, you have dermis here. So let me see if I can draw on that. Yeah. So this is stratum basale. It's right before dermis. And then this is granulosum. So all the purple that's on top, that's going to be spinosum. So right here, that's spinosum. And in between, sorry, that's granulosum. And then all this purple is spinosum. And then the lucidum is this light layer here on top. It's lighter than this darker purple here. Okay, so your textbook shows it like this. These are all the layers: stratum corneum, stratum lucidum, stratum granulosum, spinosum, and then stratum basale. So how are you going to remember all this? So one thing you need to understand that you got all these terms here, and if I were to give you a microscope slide and put a needle on a microscope in one of these layers, how do you know which one it is? So there are things called mnemonics. So there's a mnemonic to memorize this, and the one that can help you remember it is the one that's known as it's called "Come, let's get sunburned." So let's see right here. I'm gonna get a blank slide. I'm gonna see if I can type on this. Okay, so the mnemonic said, "Come, let's get sunburned." So the C in come stands for corneum, so stratum corneum. And then L in let's stands for stratum lucidum. And G here stands for stratum granulosum. And then S here stands for stratum spinosum. And then the last one here burned, B in burn stands for stratum basale. So this can help you. The first letter of the word is going to be stand for whichever layer it is. So this can help you memorize it. So the C stands for corneum, L stands for stratum lucidum, and then next one is the G. The G in the word get stands for stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, the S in the sun, and then B in the burn, stratum basale. So if you're not 100% sure and you need to tell yourself, well, I don't know which layer this is, maybe try to remember the mnemonic, let's get sunburned, or write it in the corner of your notes or something like that. And then on the exam, you can just count down and that will tell you which layer that is. So, it's kind of ironic because, this is going in dermatology territory and people can get skin cancer from getting sunburns. So that's going to be different layers of epidermis now. So remember that skin is more than just epithelial tissue. It's going to be made up of dermis, which is the other stuff in epithelium. So you have the actually you have the epidermis, then you have dermis here, and they're going to be have these cells, and the cells, the prefix here or the root word site means cells. So keratinocytes means cells. Keratin is a protein, and the protein, that cell has keratin in it. So that's going to be keratinocyte. And you have this other thing called the melanocyte. And these site cells or melanocells produce melanin. That's going to be a dark pigment, and that's what gives you color if you go and sit in the sun. And then what happens is that melanocytes are going to get hit by hormones, and the hormones will cause melanocytes to produce this dark pigment. Let me see. Okay. And that's how a person gets suntan. And then there are something called dendritic cells, and they have two names. They're also called Langerhans cells. And in your textbook, it's going to be dendritic, but the old name is going to be Langerhans. And that was a historical name for this because it was named after the scientist who discovered it. And these cells are involved in immunity. Basically, what I mean by that is you got all these cells and these little projectiles here. Let me see. I can show you. But anyway, so these cells, they will they will they kind of are going to be like dendritic. So they're kind of going to look like star shape, I can say. So let's see. So here you can see that one. So right here kind of looks star shape. So if I draw that, it's gonna kind of look like this. And then there's this nucleus in the middle. That's a dendritic cell. And if you happen to say like bacteria is there, and let's say then there's this little bacteria near it, kind of hanging out, it's going to grab it and eat it. It's going to stretch out and reach and grab, and then they'll grab things that don't belong there. They gobble them up, and that's part of your immune system. That's and these are called dendritic cells, and these have kind of these long arms coming off to help them stretch and grab things. Next, we have our Merkel cells. These are sensory cells, and these sensory cells are going to be responsible for touch, which are sensory receptors in human skin. So these are called Merkel cells or Merkel disc. And if you were to look these up, you can see these are the Merkel cells, and they are responsible for things like touch, pain, and temperature. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so on top of that, you should be able to recognize the difference between thick skin and thin skin. So I mentioned this before, that in your palms of your hands and soles of your foot have really, really thick skin. So you can see that the stratum corneum is thicker. So let me see. Let me go back. So yeah, so these are at the same magnification. So this is at light microscope 240, and this is also light microscope 240. This is thick skin and this is thin skin. This is stratum corneum in maybe your hands, and this would be stratum corneum at maybe your arm. So where you have thin skin, versus thick skin is found in your palms and soles of your feet. So I'm just gonna write under thick skin, I must say palm, and then soles of your feet or sole of your foot. So stratum corneum is the big difference between thick skin and thin skin, the size of it. And the big difference, maybe you're looking at different magnifications, you might think, but you're looking at the same magnification. So, but notice how thick the skin is on the palm compared to everywhere else in the body. So the difference between thick skin and thin skin, other than the fact that one is thick, the other one is thin, is that it has to do with stratum lucidum. So here, stratum lucidum is visible, and you can't really see it on this one. So thick skin, I'm gonna say thick skin, stratum lucidum is visible, and thin skin, you can't see it. Stratum lucidum is not visible. So that's a big difference. Now, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It's there, it's just hard to see. You can clearly see that the textbook has labeled stratum lucidum in the thick skin, but hasn't labeled it in the thin skin. It's going to be very light layer right above stratum granulosum, and it doesn't indicate that in the thin skin. But I want to be very clear about it being not visible. So it doesn't mean that it's not there. It is there. It's just difficult to see because the skin is so thin. So if I were to go ahead and put a microscope setup in the lab, and then I were to point to this layer over here, that you can, the slightly light, then that's going to be stratum lucidum. So for sure, you know that's going to be in thick skin, but if you don't see the light layer there, then that's going to indicate that you're probably looking at thin skin. And then stratum corneum should indicate that it should be much thinner compared to the thick skin. So those are big differences. One, stratum corneum is really thick in the thick skin compared to the thin skin, and stratum lucidum is visible in the thick skin and it's not visible in the thin skin. So next portion of the lecture is focused on dermis. So I'm going to stop this video here and then I'll make another one for the dermis. Thank you for listening.